This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
The background, I am self-employed for most of my life, typically speaking for the product and not for the people. In 2004, I became a notary public where I watched people sign in multiple circumstances under completely different medical issues, end-of-life deals, normal handwriting. I was not happy with the lending industry at that time. They seemed to not be putting out very good loans. So I decided to become a real estate agent, procuring mortgages and dealing with the public in an ethical manner and not providing loans that they could not fulfill. In 2006, the market crumbled. I found myself in a position where I needed to retrain, go back to school, and figure out what I really wanted to do with my life. And I came into document examination. 2007, I went to school as an apprentice for 2 years where I completed the education and multiple cases. I think I handled a little over 100 cases within the 2 years. In 2009, just before my apprenticeship was coming to an end, I decided to go back to school and re-educate. At the same time, I met Dennis Kaufman, who believed his stepfather, Jack Tarrance, was the Zodiac Killer. And he asked me to complete a handwriting examination, which is how we end up here today. In 2011, I completed a degree in legal assisting. I took the LSAT. I thought I was going to law school, and I realized that the system wasn't meant for me. I would probably have ended up in jail every other day in contempt for how things were done. So I went back to school, and in 2012, I completed a degree in psychology. I focused in gerontology, the brain, biological psychology, how the effects of handwriting, or the effects on handwriting, should I say, due to illness, age, outside influences such as alcohol, drugs, medications, stress, anything that might actually have an effect on the handwriting so that when I was doing examinations, I could come to the right conclusion. I have currently handled examinations for the Public Defender's Office, the DA, the FBI, Immigration Court, requests from judges inside of a courthouse, government entities like the correctional system, CalPERS, arbitrators, mediators, workman's comp, Sally Mae, insurance companies, attorneys, and the public. I have probably worked for just about every level of society. To date, I've handled over 800 cases that included thousands of documents that were at issue or for comparison. And I've testified more than 60 times in court for deposition, mediation, and arbitrations. I am currently the membership co-chair of my forensic society, and I look forward to becoming certified with them next week. I have completed a forensic photography class, and I have recently completed a latent print radiology class with the Napa Sheriff's Department, which I actually did because I found a full rolled thumbprint from Jack Tarrance in his belongings, which included 2 deltas and a whole lot of friction ridge surface that can be used for a comparison in many of these cases we're going to talk about. I know that these cases are very old and decades of media have distorted or disseminated the information for one reason or another. much of it to do with monopolizing on the mystery, because the mystery makes the most money. Most of the information is really vast in these cases for anybody to absorb or take in unless they have a lot of time. So I'm going to cut to the chase. I'm going to provide you the evidence that I have found in the Zodiac Killer case, how it pertains and is compared to Jack Tarrance's handwriting. We're then going to start at the beginning of Jack's life and walk our way through it all over the United States. And in that instance, you're going to see cases that are going to pop up that have been or remained unsolved for all of these years. And there are some where people have actually been jailed for these crimes. You will find them in this presentation, and you will have to sort the information out for yourself. But honestly speaking, I know that Jack had conveyed to Dennis that he was very well aware that there were other people that were doing time for his crimes. It is kind of a way to keep you in a constant state of wonderment where you may never figure this out, and that's where the case becomes extremely overwhelming. So we're going to talk about the claims of others, the dissemination of the information that comes from documentaries and true crime shows that you're watching today. I'm going to cover nothing but the truth. However, there may be files or evidence in this presentation that were misleading to begin with. I did not know that at the time, so I am more than happy to have people step in, correct me, let me know if they have additional information or anything that would help to put this puzzle together. I like to quote George Orwell, "In a time of universal deceit, it is a revolutionary act to tell the truth," and I've always believed that. So I got started with this particular case in 2009. As I had stated before, Dennis Kaufman had come to me and asked me to do an examination on his stepfather's handwriting. He was under the impression that his stepfather had hastened or caused his mother to pass early. In that, he had provided me with about 4 or 5 handwriting samples of Jack's handwriting, and I had spoke with my mentor on it, who had provided me with a single document of the Zodiac Killer, which I began with, and I found something like 20 characteristics in that handwriting that was consistent, or at least in agreement with how Jack wrote. It turned out that that was one of the most disguised letters from the Zodiac case, which we will cover here early on in the presentation. They've erroneously blamed and made movies about their favorite suspects over the years, as early as 2007, with people still blaming Arthur Lee Allen, who had been cleared by DNA, handwriting, and the likes. So why they continue to promote movies that make us believe or make us want to look that direction, I'm still not sure. Handwriting as a science. 1 in 8 million people actually will share similar characteristics. And in my industry and the cases that I find, no one has 8 million people around them willing to commit fraud or to attempt to forge another person's handwriting. So with that being said, we would be looking at 1 in 8 million people that could have a comparable match. However, there's still going to be some type of a difference in that handwriting that indicates that you can separate one author from the next. The basis for handwriting is that no 2 people write alike, and no one ever writes the same twice. So we're looking at what we call a natural variation. Every person has anywhere from 2 to 8 different ways they can create a letter or an allograph. And knowing that, you are literally looking for these 2 to 8 different ways in order to make that comparison. In 2008, to overcome a Daubert review, professors and PhDs developed a computer program that analyzed handwriting with a 98% accuracy of identifying 2 separate authors and a 96% identification of a single author. The number then increases, or the percentage of identification or exclusion increases with a human document examiner, because we can make exceptions for things that other people cannot make exceptions for, such as the paper was tilted, or they were ill, or they were under medication. These are things that the computer cannot do because it sticks to a strict parameter. This coupled with the human examiner's experience of the outside factors and the computer, or what the computer could not account for, makes us irreplaceable in the court system. I enter in this presentation with good intention to describe and help you to understand the basics of handwriting and identification and how it played out in these cases that led to the theories that I've come to, where others have come long before me. With that, let's go ahead and get into the presentation. All right. So Jack W. Tarrance Jr., I had originally labeled this file Monsters Among Us, but I have found that people have since come out and named their own either podcast or documentary, but I did label this as a career killer. Jack Tarrance might very well be the most prolific killer of all times. Handwriting was his MO in the crimes he wanted to be known for, and I think that he killed so that he could write about it, which is kind of vice versa of how the public looks at it, whereby they thought he was writing to brag about his kills. I think he was writing to obtain front page access or access to media outlets so that he could pass on the message that his kill had been done. His killing spree can be tracked back as far as 1945, and there are crimes and communications as current as 2006. So these letters tell a story through the eyes of what I call a career killer. There's going to be a lot of information we're going to cover. I don't expect you to remember it all. I will take questions probably at the end of the segment if there is time. You'll see a whole lot of evidence that supports Jack Tarrance Jr. as the best suspect for the Zodiac crimes and what came before the Zodiac and after the Zodiac. I submit, like I said, that the Zodiac didn't just show up one day and kill 5 people, injure 2 more, and then fall off the earth the next day. The Zodiac began, as every serial killer did, with baby steps in the murders, the MO, the communications with the media, the victim's parents, and law enforcement. FBI has actually labeled this an extortion case. I completely understand why. They looked at it as though he was extorting front page access from media outlets by killing people. And the media will have you believe he was attempting to draw fear into the community while they were being extorted for front page access. I believe he was either a crisis antagonist to control public with fear during times of great political issues. And there's also a contention that some of the victims in the series were targets and others were random in order to create the ambiguity of a serial killer while covering up the intentional target. The Zodiac did not write because he wanted to brag about his kills. He wrote to get cryptic messages to what I believe might be handlers or other individuals that he was better than all others, including the police, the FBI, and any other law enforcement agency out there. I think that he killed so that his letters could be taken serious. In 2 parts, this was how he got to the cryptic messages to the right people, and then they were able to get messages back to him as well, while instilling that sense of fear in the public to distract them from something that was greater happening at the time. It was no coincidence that only one ciphered message has ever been acknowledged to the public as being solved. The FBI indicates that methods used, including various cryptic systems, but how could they know this if only one cipher has ever truly been solved? We're going to see the crimes that are included. They do not overlap each other. When Jack is gone, the crimes are gone. When Jack is there, the crimes are there. Due to these facts, I do believe that Jack should be investigated in regards to every single crime listed within this presentation, to either clear him of culpability or to include him as a possible suspect, which could likely lead to him being the most prolific killer of our nation's history. I've completed an independent exam on all the handwriting in this presentation, with the exception of the letters where I have notated in this presentation. It is my intention to get to those letters as we move through the presentation and do that comparison so that when we discuss them, I'm already briefed on what we will be talking about and how they compare. The majority of the information on Jack's life was provided to me by Dennis Kaufman, which will give me the accounts of Jack's whereabouts. I have pictures as evidence, paper trail of Jack's stored receipts, visual items that Jack had in his belongings. Other than that, the majority of the research and the way that it is put together in this presentation has been done completely by myself, with the exception of a few individuals who have worked on either ciphering or attempting to cipher the codes, which we'll discuss those. Books that have been written, information taken from the internet. Again, some of it may not be entirely true because you just don't know what you can count on with the media. The presentation is open to changes as I move along. So as new information is presented, if people are willing to bring forward messages and communications and other crimes, I am more than happy to put these in and see how they fit in this puzzle. I would hate to accuse anyone anywhere where there is evidence to support innocence. And while sometimes I tend to believe there could be a chance Jack wrote the letters and someone else committed the crime, just to create the ambiguity of an actual suspect, if the DNA doesn't match the handwriting and the handwriting doesn't match the fingerprints, and the information can't be put together on a single individual, there's a chance that that crime can never be solved. Jack Tarrance also used many variations of names, which I will cover throughout this presentation as well. Some of the ones you will see, he was born J.W. Tarrance Jr. He's also used John Tarrance, Jack W. Tarrance Jr., Jack Tarrance, J.W. Barnett, Jack Barnett, Jack W. Torrance, Jack W. Tarrance with an E, Jack W. Self, and likely many other names that I'm unaware of at this point. But without much more hesitation, let's go ahead and get into this presentation, and we're going to start working on the handwriting of the Zodiac Killer and how it compares to Jack Tarrance. These 2 pages are excerpts out of the book The Demon of the Southwest Wind, which was written by Stephen Dewhurst, a professor from Arizona University who had a brief instance of working with myself and sometime with Dennis. He purchased the book rights and thus had written this particular book. I've actually pulled out these 2 pages here because this is what I saw when I was presented with some of the evidence after coming to the conclusion that the handwriting was a match. And it was this small green metal box and this Tupperware bowl that contained the items to the right here that you see, which are some keys, some key tags, it looks like a clothesline rope or some type of a rope. There's some earrings, which only one of each earring was found inside of that package. A knife that we're going to heavily talk about when we get to that stage of this presentation, and then the
Annette, sorry to interrupt you, but your sharing went away. If you could just share it again, so your audience can see it. Yeah.
Oh, it did go away. Oh, people don't want me to share, do they? Yeah. Are we there now?
Yes, we're good.
Okay, so back to where we were. If people couldn't see that before, here's the little green box with the Tupperware bowl on top of it, and to the right, the items that were found inside. Again, we covered keys, key tags, clothesline cord, earrings, a emperor knife, and 2 razor pilot pens that appeared to have been heavily used. The tips were bent. You can see behind me later when we take this down, I have the representation of the pen that was given to the FBI. I thought that that would have been a simple ink test in comparison to the ink found on the Zodiac Killer letters, which would have given us some insight as to whether or not these pens were used to complete the communications that were done in this particular color. Technical difficulties here. Come on. Okay. I'm going to actually start with one of the very first, the first letter that I'm going to start with is actually one that did not come until 2005. This letter was sent to me by an anonymous individual, screen name Sad Badge. He came in, he discussed some things with me for a little bit. He provided me this letter, and then he disappeared off the face of the earth to no avail. This particular letter was sent to Tim Miller. His daughter was killed in the 1980s, which we'll cover at another time. However, when I saw this letter, it struck me as this was Zodiac 101. And what I noticed most consistent with it was the attempt to take credit for many crime sprees that occurred over many years. Also, though, to do exactly as the Zodiac Killer did is tell them when he didn't do something. So we're going to take a look at this one first. It's going to wrap up some of the cases that I believe we'll be looking at through this presentation. Anyways, let's get started with it. This particular communication was done with cutouts from a magazine, as you can see, which is one of the MOs for communications that the Zodiac used. I believe that he, like I said, is taking credit for some different crimes throughout this particular communication. The cutouts run consistent with being used in the Black Dahlia case, the missing case of Donna Lass, the Zodiac Killer, DB Cooper. You're going to see that many crime sprees actually contain cutouts, and that is just one simple connection in the deck of cards. The confession part of this letter being sent to Tim Miller is much like confession letters sent in Sherry Jo Bates of the Riverside Killer or the Red Phantom Killer. Many others that were sent to law enforcement or other victims' family members. He refers to Tim in this particular letter just as the ransom note in the John Benet Ramsey case referred to the parent. So when you go down this particular letter, you're going to see Tim Miller, boo, it's me. If anyone's familiar with the Zodiac case, boo was a well-used word in those communications. And it says, you're looking for, it's me you're looking for. You've not seen me, but I was the last man your Laura saw, and many more. The police won't get me, for I am too smart, and I tampered with the evidence. So we're going to talk about that too as well, his ability or knowledge in regards to covering his crime or any type of evidence he might have left during it. He says, super fudge works well, which I believe is a relation to the anthrax letters. We'll cover that when we get there. And what really struck me is the silent killer with his silence broken, but my identity is still secret. He had conveyed he was the Zodiac Killer to his stepson, Dennis Kaufman. He had planned with Dennis Kaufman to have a book written about him being the Zodiac Killer, but it was not to be published until after he passed because he was afraid of what people thought, not about getting in trouble because he knew the evidence wasn't there. In 2005, Dennis had become frustrated with the case. Law enforcement was taking the evidence he was giving them. Nothing was happening. He even felt that evidence was being round filed or suppressed. And he went back to Jack and he told Jack that he felt that he was just done with the case. Nobody believed him and nobody was on board. So I think that was the catalyst for this particular document that came out. So he goes on to say, understanding who is at fault is key. And we see that in his little metal box, we have some keys with some tags, and we'll talk about those as well. I'm losing. It says, it's behind this monster in me that makes me kill other Caucasian girls with brown hair. Second in the 80s series, which I believe this has to do with Texas, which is where Jack's originally from, or the League Cities Field of Death and the hundreds of I-45 deaths. All the ones with brown hair and who are white and look enough like her. We'll talk about who her is. Now and then some from a convenience store phone, which is where I believe Tim Miller's daughter was abducted. I am not the only one killing girls. This is Zodiac 101. If you had it wrong or you thought he was doing something that he wasn't doing, he was bound to let you know that. He says, I'm not the only one killing girls, Tim. No Mexican or no yellow, and I cannot read the balance or the other side of that, were killed by me. The very first killings in the 80s series was some other guy too. I am the one kills and more will die. Some to place on exhibit, the publicity, but most are underground. Better believe she will pay or you are dead wrong. Be assured that more bodies and bones are to come out, the remains to be found. And then you can see things at the bottom of this. We have a 666, which to date, the only thing I can relate that to is a reference to the Devil's Highway in it runs from Texas, Arizona to Colorado, and I believe Ohio. There are murders in Arizona while Jack was present that have not been solved. I'm not checked to see if those actually fell on the Highway 666. We also see the upside down cross that was almost kind of an epitome of the Zodiac symbol. We see the phantom that's written in here twice. I believe that pertains to the Texarkana phantom, the freeway phantom, and just overall the idea that he believed he was a ghost. And I can see why he thought he was a ghost. As he moved in and out of areas and these crimes were committed, he was almost ultimately not in town when the body was found, and then back in town, committed a few more crimes, and then was out of that state for good. So they're still back there looking for this person they believe is somewhere in that state when they're truly not. We see things at the bottom like All the Live Long Day, which is obviously a poetic reference. Again, that's Zodiac 101. We see things like Too Many Barrels of Fun. Let me also back up and give you some background on this letter. Tim Miller indicated it was mailed to him in September of 2005. And at that point in time, it was believed that Jack was in Washington. It wasn't until after meeting with Mr. Miller and him having Dennis come back to Texas with him that they met with Jack's aunt, who had indicated that Jack was indeed in Texas in September of 2005, requesting some boxes he had left in her on her property. However, he had been gone for so many years and she figured she was never going to see him again that she just dumped it all. So when he showed up to obtain those boxes, which I believe was due to the fact that Dennis said he didn't have the evidence that he needed, Jack found out that those boxes were no longer available. Jack lived 50 minutes, or his mother lived for 50 minutes, as well as himself at certain times, from the League City, Texas, and one of his really good friends who ended up having a daughter that dated his son lived within the same zip code and area of League City. So the proximity is there. We do know that we have Jack in Texas in September of 2005 when this particular document was mailed. The upside down cross, which is can be related to the crime spree, but I'm sure that it is taking credit for something. I just haven't identified it yet. The phantom, as mentioned before, the 80s series, the I-45, the League City Field of Death. And then we see at the bottom, Jack's residence is Dale, Texas, which is 50 minutes from. So to cover the actual words and the linguistics of this particular communication, I call it the finale letter. It's a cutout version. It's written, or not written, but pasted on unlined paper. Written to the victim's father, just as Sherry Jo Bates was. Refers to Boo, which is seen in the Zodiac Halloween card. Claims too smart to get caught, which is a Zodiac 101. He's tampered with the evidence, which we do see in letters to John Walsh called the Scorpion Letters. Superfudge works well. Superfudge turns out to be a child's book authored by Judy Bloom out of Humble, Texas, no less, which is really on the outskirts of Bush International Airport. It was written in 1971. And note that the connection to this particular address when we get to the envelope is that the return address is Tom Humble. I believe this is two-part, one for Tom Voigt and one for Humble being Humble, Texas. This is consistent with the mailing of the anthrax letters where the return address actually comes from a fourth grader. So that was an interesting connection. Use of recent news in the communication. So he knows what's going on. This has occurred in the Zodiac, the Scorpion letters, the Black Dahlia letters, and the Tom Voigt letters. His identity still being a secret and understanding who is at fault is the key. I think that Jack is aware that no one buys the Zodiac killer, that evidence that Dennis is bringing forward, and this is bothering him. So a monster, he considers himself a monster. He considers himself a blueprint designed killer, and we'll discuss how I came to those conclusions. Killing Caucasian girls with brown hair who look enough like her, which if he was one of those individuals that had some type of perverse love for his mother, as a profiler might like to call it, then these girls did in fact look like his mother. Black Dahlia, these brunettes, and Caucasian girls that we're going to see throughout the crime sprees. The 80 series claims of a series called the 80 series, the Scorpion statement that he started a new crime spree, and this may relate directly to those that were in the 80s. We'll see. He claims the League City Field of Death series killings, claims the I-45 series. He would take the girls from convenience stores. He wasn't taking credit for any killings that he didn't commit. He claims more will die. And if you've seen any of the Zodiac letters or those communications, there was always a contention that more will come. You will find more. So more is a huge point in all of this. The publicity, that's all he really talked about. He wanted to be known for what he had done. The underground, which is the reference that the Zodiac made in the Tom Voigt letters, claims to have lived in caves for some period of his life. The more bodies and bones that are to come out, we saw with the League City, there were teeth, there were jaws, there were hand bones that were found in the area where the 12-year-old murder had occurred of Laura Miller. Also noting that there had been information that there were multiple sets of hands found in the same grave site. So as if the killer was using the same burial site for multiple bodies. Starfield, which is, I believe, where Laura Miller's body was found, it says 4 can be 5 or 6. This is definitely a Zodiac thing to do. We'll talk about a letter where he says minus 100 plus, leaving you to wonder whether or not or how many people he has killed. The Phantom linking him to the Texarkana Phantom and Red Phantom, and then Barrels of Fun. Definitely a Southern reference, and definitely something that the Zodiac liked to talk about was having fun. All the Live Long Day, which is I've been working on the railroad. We're going to see cases where I believe the railroad was used for him to make his trips back and forth, and Jack himself had indicated he had used the railroad to get around. The poems are referenced like Red Phantom and the Zodiac Killer. The cutout version is connecting to Black Dahlia and Zodiac. On the envelope side of it, on the envelope side of it, we're going to see words like attack, neighbors, accessible, railway, rural, serious, suspense, vulnerability. You could look for my clues. That's another thing the Zodiac stated. It says the word photo. Jack actually had rolls of film in that green container we looked at in the beginning, which I believe had evidence in regards to crimes on it, and we will see those pictures as well. Tom Humble, Super Fudge, that's Tom Voigt, mentioning again Humble, Texas, making the connection to Super Fudge and the fourth grader. The League City, Texas, he did not use a use of comma for separation between the city and state. We'll see that this is consistent with both the Zodiac and Jack. He talks about a mystery. Mystery is going to be big too, and more projects to come. And then, of course, Fooler. He then also reminds people that they had the wrong person. So Abel was what they referred to as the NASA horseman. He owned property, I believe, where some of the bodies were found. He had horses. He allowed and assisted in the search for the crimes in Texas, and then ended up being a suspect. He specifically says on this letter that Abel is not the devil sought by the League City Blue Fuzz. And Blue Fuzz will fall in line with things like the Zodiac said, Blue Meanie. So when we get to that, it'll all start to make some sense. Officer Pat Serial, I'm not sure what his role was in this, but he calls him out on this letter. He refers to him in regards to having his profiling or some assessment about the case being incorrect. He does say that his MO changes. We saw that about midway with the Zodiac. He became extremely upset that people were accusing him of doing things in less than a sportsmanlike way. And so he indicated he was no longer going to tell you about who he killed. He was going to make them look like random accidents, acts of violence, so that you wouldn't be able to determine whether or not it was him. And then, of course, back to the 666. I'm going to be checking on the murders along this route from Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona to see which ones can be actually placed in that series. The description of the types of girl that Jack killed is a description of the Black Dahlia. The taken from the convenience store phone, we're going to see that as a running MO in some of the crimes. It's similar to the Sherry Jo Bates confession letter that mentions the little store. So he'd taken some from a little store in that letter. He mentions Tim again. He likes to call people by their name. He likes to be assertive with who he's discussing things with. He mentions, like I said, that somebody else was involved. So don't think he did all of these killings. There's been mention of more than one person involved, starting in the JonBenet Ramsey, then Anthrax, and now the finale letter. So as we go through these communications, we'll see that there is an inclination that there's something or some other people involved with it. The statement about the victims being for public view, we saw this in the laying of the Black Dahlia body. We saw this in the Oakland County child murders, about the way the bodies were positioned or posed right out in public for people to see. And that there are others underground, which the Zodiac speaks about, and in the Tom Voigt letters discussed the same. Tim Miller, again, referenced more than once in this letter, just like JonBenet Ramsey letter, where he keeps referring to John Ramsey, and in the letters to Tom Voigt, where he continuously uses Tom's name over and over again. Reference to being too smart, just like the Zodiac. That's Scorpion, JonBenet Ramsey, and Tom Voigt. Super Fudge works well. Looks like we're kind of recovering some things that we've already talked about, but let me just move on to the actual envelope and letter, the other side of the letter itself. So here we can see in the top left-hand corner of the envelope where it says Tom Humble, it actually lists out an address, Main League City, Texas, and then it takes, I'm believing, credit for what was called the Corvette Concepts fiasco mystery. Why this one was included, I didn't even know of this particular act until I saw this letter, and of course I investigated it, and we will cover that particular crime as it comes through. It is sent directly to Tim Miller's EquiSearch in Dickinson, Texas, and we see the right bottom corner where more projects to come. So in 2005, I don't know that he's indicating he's going to be killing anybody anymore, but that there would be more information or more things coming out about who he was, which I figured may even have alluded to the fact that he believed Dennis was going to write a book. Here's where we see Pat the cop as a ridiculous fooler. NASA Horseman Abel is not the devil sought by the League City Blue Fuzz. The key to the nightmare field of deaths is that it's a hectic public location. One little shrine and more are secrets. So there's still more out there I think we're looking for. And he goes back to Officer Pat's serial profile process work is flawed. We've seen that happen in DB Cooper when he indicated that the FBI had flawed the composite of the individual who hijacked the plane. We saw that in the High Hills letter written to the media that the FBI examined, where they had misstated how he was able to be as accurate at night in shooting his victims as he was. He needed to let them know how that happened. So he wanted to tell them they had it wrong and then correct them. So he made sure they had it right. And at the very bottom there, my MO changes. I did get a partial phone number in the bottom right-hand corner. I think when we get to this letter, I was actually able to figure out what that number was, but I was not able to link it to anything in particular. So maybe that's something that the public can help with as we go. In the handwritten version, here's where we see things like risen. We see what appears to be the Z underneath a stamp, which I almost mistakenly thought was an Army Ranger patch, maybe a relation to military, but I believe that I was able to actually find a stamp that was consistent with this particular pattern, and we'll look at that when we get to the stamps. Again, we had many photos, though they've all been either given to law enforcement, FBI, not returned. We did have an instance where we had provided negatives to the Los Angeles Police Department Cold Case Division, and those negatives did not come back to us. But I did luckily already have them produced or processed and some work done on them to try to bring the image forward. It was very old film that had been sitting for a very long time and undoubtedly not always in the best environment. So let's just move on to Jack now at this point. The initial composite and description of the Zodiac Killer in 1969 was approximately 5'8" to 5'10" in height. Of most of the media information released, this was consistent, 5'8" to 5'10". You'll have people telling you now today that there are individuals they believe that were the Zodiac and they are 6'2". So somehow they want to avoid this narrow area of 5'8" to 5'10" to include their own suspects, but Jack was actually 5'10", so he is within the range. It indicated he had curly brown or light reddish brown hair worn in a crew cut, which is absolutely Jack's hair color, at least when it's not dyed. And he definitely wore primarily a crew cut, wearing horn rim glasses, and usually wore dark clothing. The part that I want to remind people here is that this composite gives you a version of eyeglasses. These eyeglasses appear to be what I would consider to be translucent, plastic, clear. Otherwise, we would have seen them colored in with some type of color. We can see in the picture just below with Jack that his glasses are clear plastic with some coloring towards the top, but for the most part, it exposes his face as you would expect a clear frame to do. It says that he usually wore wool trousers and dark navy blue or black windbreaker jacket with distinctive military chukka boots known as wing walkers. Jack actually owned wing walkers in the size 10.5, which is actually the size that was found at the crime scenes. It's stated medium or slightly stocky build. One survivor described the Zodiac as having an odd gait. That is, he had a particular lumbering or heavy walk. We'll discuss Jack's back injury and the surgery that he had for it and why this lumber or this gait would be present with Jack. Again, the boot prints found at the Hartnell Shepherd crime scene were size 10.5, and the gloves in Stein's cab were size 7. However, they were never able, to my knowledge, determine whether or not those gloves were actually left there by another cab rider or if they were that of the Zodiac Killer. Survivor Brian Hartnell describes the Zodiac's voice as slow and measured and having a unique sound and cadence with a monotone. A police dispatcher had taken a phone call from the Zodiac Killer and described him as having a drawl. That leads back to Jack coming from Texas, and we will get to hear his voice through this presentation. So you will get to hear that type of voice that is being described as the physical description. I also have to mention that I have come into contact and spent some time with a former link analysis detective from the San Francisco Police Department, Tom Dixon, who was at the Presidio on the night of the Stein murder and had actually viewed and given his description of who he believed the Zodiac was. We talked extensively about it, and he showed me how to put this stuff together so that the links could be seen through the evidence. So traits and authorship. Jack has an ability to write on unlined paper evenly and straight. The use of his paper, like margins and line spacing, are consistent with that of the Zodiac Killer. He can write naturally in several different styles of handwriting, and he has a vertical to hard right slant. Jack's favorite pen happened to be the Pilot Razor point felt tip pen, and he creates spaces between syllables and words, creating the appearance that the word is broken into 2, possibly 3 words. He also combines 2 or 3 words and uses them as he writes, something like wannabe. Individual characteristics of spacing between letters and words are identical between these 2 authors. Jack proclaims he is right-handed but can write with both, and he claims to have written the Channel 9 newsletter in May of 1974 with his left hand. The addressing sequences between these 2 authors are identical. Punctuation and linguistics are in agreement between both authors. Jack carried a ham radio license for 7 to 10 years after returning from Atsugi, Japan Air Force Base, where the main job for the military personnel was to man a radio station with the Allies as service. And learning to encode with many different systems was already in Jack's arsenal. So it stands to reason that when he came back to America, he began using the ham radio, and he had something like 4 different licenses all the way up to professional at one point in time. And that's where we're going to see the hood that was found by Dennis Coffin come into play. The PA system that Jack used during that time frame as a ham radio operator is where the hood was. There's evidence that suggests that he actually even knew about cipher codes and other things before going to Atsugi, Japan. I think this just heightened it. Jack has a hypnosis symbol written in his own handwriting and has been observed using this device during an affiliation with Dennis. The hypnosis symbol resembles the crosshair symbols recognized as the Zodiac Killer. So I want everybody to remember that the Zodiac did not name himself. Many people thought that this had to do with some type of Zodiac killings that followed the solstice and the moon. It could also be a gun sight, as a gun was one of his methods of murder. But I think it really leads back to this particular hypnosis symbol. Jack has always been an avid hunter growing up on a farm with full capability of dismembering small and large game, skinning, fleshing, bisecting, hide tanning capabilities. He pretty much was capable of all of it. He was also an excellent orienteer that could literally call out different lakes and places while 35,000 feet in the air, and he's taken pictures to prove just that. Traits of the suspect's writing, or the Zodiac Killer, is a poetic reference or style of writing, ability to execute lengthy communications while disguising natural handwriting to a good degree. However, he does eventually go back and start leaving traits that are more natural. Zodiac's choice of pen was a blue ink felt tip pen, and many of the communications appear to be written in a felt tip pen. However, the color, the specific color is unknown, but it does look consistent with the blue Pilot Razor pen.
Hi, Nanette.
Yes.
We are about to hit our time mark.
Okay. Well, then I guess we will continue this next week and we will start looking at the handwriting. Everybody have a great day. Oh,